There he is, Josh Pate on the Buppy's Catering Hotline. What's up, Josh?
I'm doing good, David. You say protective gear is available at Academy, which is accurate. Now, I would assume 99.999% of the viewing audience thinks football helmet, baseball helmet, pads, which is probably what the ad read entails. However, I do a little storm chasing, right?
Yes, you do.
So one of the compliments of my life was actually a girl I grew up with who lives over in West Central Georgia where they had bad weather the other day, sends me a video. I just saw it last night, even though she sent it a few days ago, in which she was walking through an Academy parking lot into Academy to get protective gear for potential tornadoes. Because as you know, head trauma is the most common form of injury in a tornado. So she went to buy the helmet, but it wasn't for baseball purposes, or perpi, the plural of purpose. So you can get protection from all different sorts of things at Academy.
Such as buying a cup.
Yes. Everything needs protection in every walk of life these days.
The reason I say that is our coach yesterday at Brazos Valley MMA said, you should probably invest in a cup because I keep getting kicked. So I'm just saying, you can use it for baseball, softball, you can use it for anything. All right. Hey, speaking of storm chasing, crazy storms last week. Were you able to make the treks?
Yeah. I drove 1,060 miles on Saturday.
Wow.
On the dot. 1060. Started in Columbus, Georgia, went up to Birmingham, down to Tuscaloosa, down to Hattiesburg, over to a bunch of different towns in southern Mississippi, back up to Laurel, back up to Meridian, Demopolis, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Nashville. Those were the cities that we hit on Saturday. We struggled to see things because they were all rain wrapped. We were in 3 different tornadic circulations, just couldn't see much of anything. So I would love to tell you, hey, I brought pictures, I brought video. It's just a bunch of rain curtains. That's all you would see. And it was pretty harrowing. Don't want to make light of it because there was a lot of loss of life, tons of property damage, which they're still assessing. But it was an adventure. First chase of the spring, certainly not the last, but it was an adventure.
Hey, I'm sure I've asked you before, but just remind me, how'd you get into storm chasing? Like, how did this become one of your passions?
Well, when I was growing up, like I'm talking about really little kid, I would go to school. Both of my parents worked, so I would ride the bus to Meemaw's house and stay with her for a few hours every day until one of my parents got off work, come pick me up. So like many kids, I just laid on the floor, kind of like this, and I would watch Sports Center on TV, but I would also stay glued to the Weather Channel. So I really loved sports and atmospheric science and weather growing up. Then when Twister came out in the mid-'90s, I was just old enough to kind of go to movies and see it and get it. And ever since then, the concept of doing that hooked me, which is wild because if you consider the fact that I was terrified of roller coasters, water parks, etc. as a kid, you would think the last thing that would appeal to me is storm chasing. For some reason, it appealed to me. And I always said, if I ever get the means and the freedom to do it, I want to shape my spring where I can go do that. So covering college football is very beneficial in that vein.
So have you ever had any really scary incidents, storm chasing, like really scary?
Ton of them, yeah. We just passed the anniversary a couple of weeks ago of March 3rd, 2019. We were over in Beauregard, Alabama, EF4 tornado over there. We ended up having 23 fatalities in that tornado. All were within a quarter-mile radius of our pinpoint on the map where we were. And then a year to the day later, I had moved to Nashville to take this job, and our building, the building I'm in right now, got hit by another EF4 tornado. Been in 2 EF4s a year apart to the day, 2019, 2020. We had 25 fatalities in that one. 2 of them were right across the street from where I sit here. And that's the only time I have taken shelter from a tornado in my adult life. Every other time I've been chasing them, but that was the only time I was in a building. I had to go underground. Very weird feeling, by the way, because that actually was a tornado that sideswiped this building. So yeah, March 3rd, David, be careful on March 3rd.
Josh, I think Deion Sanders is so famous that within a year or two apart, you can go from thinking he is just what's wrong with college football and you don't like his bravado and this and that. And at the same time, like, man, that's a really good idea. I like the idea of spring games with other teams, which has been brought up before, but he's actually got the stones to say, let's go do it. And looks like Fran Brown wants to do it too.
Yeah, I think that when people have said it in the past, it's been, very abstract of, hey, I wish we had real games for spring. That's where it ends. What you always needed was you needed a plan and then you needed a runway long enough for the plan to be able to take off. I think we are seeing a little confluence of events here that I think is going to yield fruit on this front. All right, the first one is everybody's looking for money now. Every program's looking for added revenue streams. And I've known this part. I have known that media partners are there. CBS is there, Fox is there, ESPN, they've always been there. They've always looked at their spring lineup. It's desolate. After March Madness, there's nothing. And they have said, we would love to have inventory to put on these shelves. We will pay for inventory to put on these shelves. Well, if you're cash strapped or you're looking for added revenue streams, imagine ESPN giving you $1.5 or $2 million to play a spring game, and you go pay your FCS opponent that you would pay in the fall to come in, and you still end up making money, plus you have an actual real-life simulated event for the fans. The other part of that, David, I was talking to a couple of coaches about this yesterday that want to do it, is what stands in your way? And I asked every one of them, and many of them had spoken to their conference commissioners, and the feedback from the conference commissioners was as you would expect in a sport as loose as college football. It's, we don't think you're allowed to do it, but we're not sure because we don't know the rule. Like, it's just one of those classic, we haven't done it because no one else has ever done it before. So I think whoever's first, you'll have a ton of people tripping over themselves to not be third. Everyone wants to be second. Everyone wants to do it as soon as they figure out it's safe to do. I think this will happen. Now, I'm going to do a segment on my show tonight about this, because every time you mention a good idea, like I think we should breathe oxygen, I think we should drink water, there's going to be someone who comes back and says, I don't know, it doesn't sound like such a great idea. So on this, I've had people come back and say, well, it increases your exposure to injury. False. It takes away from the development time, whatever in the world that means. I also had someone who said, well, you shouldn't be forced to put things on tape and to play a game on spring if you don't want to. So very easy solutions here. First off, if you don't want to do it, don't. I haven't seen anyone, David, to my knowledge, suggest that you should be mandated to play a spring game. It's you should have the option to play it. Secondly, the injury concern. This is what I'm fascinated by. I've asked everybody who tells me you increase injury exposure by playing a real spring game to walk me through the logic. Because best I can tell, in the old way of doing things on spring Saturday, everybody on the field was one of your players. In the new way of doing things, only half the players on the field would be your players, which, correct me if I'm wrong, cuts your exposure to injury in half. And thirdly, as you know, because you've attended many football practices, they go good on good every day in practice. There is at least some 11-on-11 live ball period almost every day in practice. It's happening in practice. It's not, oh, we're going to simulate a game. Now these guys are really going to play football and risk getting hurt. No, they're not. Thirdly, I guess I'm on the third or fourth, most of the spring games had turned into thud games anyway. They weren't tackling to the ground, which you can control even in this setting. Fourthly, the development piece. Every coach I've spoken to said the same thing. We don't just want a spring game against an opponent. If we have it, we want to do it like the NFL does, where if I'm going to play North Carolina, if I'm Colorado, and I want to play North Carolina, hint, by the way, we bring them into Boulder, and then they come in on Monday, and we practice Monday, and we practice Tuesday and Wednesday, off day Thursday, then we play the spring game Saturday. They have a whole week of workouts, of organized activities against each other to where the development is maxed out. It's actually wonderful, and your guys don't have to keep hitting each other over and over again. So these are many of the benefits I see. I've still yet to be walked through any legitimate downside.
Josh, can that limit transfers, and how would you limit transfers if you could be the commissioner?
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's the one downside. That's the only current, present day downside, is you're putting your full team on display for everyone to watch and scout on TV for the spring portal to then raid your roster. The reason I didn't address that is I think the spring portal is about to be a thing of the past. So I don't think that that's going to be an issue. That'll be a moot point in the future. So you asked me what I would do. I would get rid of the spring portal. Do whatever it takes to get rid of the spring portal. It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible concept. And I also think, David, this is a whole nother conversation, but I do think with revenue stream or revenue sharing and the way that's going to be structured in the future, I think there's going to be an incentivization structure to make you want to stay on a roster, to make you want to stay and be more vested in your revenue share as a sophomore, as a junior, as a senior, to where you don't have to make anything illegal. You don't have to outlaw transferring or anything. Just if I'm paying you enough money at TexAgs and you get the parking spot you want and you got great benefits, I don't have to make it illegal for you to leave. You don't want to leave. You don't want to go anywhere. And it should be the same way in revenue sharing. Instead of this backwards approach they're trying to take right now, some are trying to take, where they're trying to bake in all these buyout clauses. And if a kid leaves and breaks his NIL deal, then he should have to pay. I get that. The logic makes sense to me, but it's also going to play terribly in public theater. You're going to get negative recruited the moment you try and recoup losses NIL-wise against a kid. It doesn't need to be that way. You can still accomplish the same thing, but you can accomplish it in your revenue share structure.
Josh, let's play a game. If I were to tell you A&M's defensive line, who spring practice starts this week, Coach Elko is going to meet with the media tomorrow. They start on Friday. If I were to tell you that A&M's defensive line will be top 8 in the SEC. That's the only information I'm going to give you other than what you already know about the program. What happens?
If they're going to be top 8 in the SEC, they'll have a reachable chance in every game, which means it's going to be the one possession games and turnovers are going to be the two talking points of the season, because I know people think, the quarterback position will be the talking point. I will be able to blindly trust that they'll be good enough at that position to where if D-line is top half of the SEC, you also bake into, I say baked in too much, but you bake into that statement the possibility that they could be the best. They could be number 3. They could be number 2 as much as they could be number 8. I think it puts them in the SEC championship conversation in mid-November. Like the down the stretch moment, which is where it's really all you can ask for. Like last year.
Yeah.
Last year they beat Texas, they go to Atlanta. Okay, well, as late as Thanksgiving Thursday, you and I could have been at the dinner table and we wouldn't know if A&M was going to Atlanta or not. What we would know is everything that's happened up to this point put us in position to where we got a shot. We control our own destiny. So I think if they get that, they control their own destiny through the duration of the season. And then at that point, you take your chances.
All right, follow-up question. Same criteria. Marcel Reed, top 8 quarterback. Then what happens with A&M?
That's a little bit more of a mystery to me, actually, because I think you can be the 8th best quarterback in the SEC this year and not be anything to write home about. Now, that could not be the case, but if we were to come into this year and you were to look at, the lineup, the Phil Steele Preview Magazine lineup of quarterbacks, and you went 9 or 10 deep with returning starters, guys you thought you could trust, that'd be one thing. We don't have that in the league this year. There's a chance that there's a number 1, number 2, and then a steep drop off to number 3 even, much less getting all the way down to number 8. So you could have the 8th best stat profile at quarterback in this conference this year and be on a team that loses 6 games for all I know. I feel better for some reason. I feel better when you guarantee me about the D-line. And I'll just take my chances at quarterback.
Right.
Because I don't think just being top 8 conditionally this year, I don't think being top 8 alone is good enough to guarantee me anything.
All right, I'm going to add some qualifiers to it. You have a top 8 defense, okay? Let's say between 5 and 8. Marcel between 5 and 8. But you also know about that running back room, okay? Mm-hmm. And if healthy, I think there'll be top 3 running back rooms in the SEC. That's my homer opinion, but I think I stand by it. If they're healthy. Offensive line, they're returning everybody, okay? Potentially there. So with that kind of scenario, it sounds to me that you're not as concerned about the offense as you are of what the defensive product is because of what we saw last year, getting after the quarterback towards the end of the season and also giving up big tackles or not giving tackles.
Yeah. I mean, Elko wasn't questioning the offense in that press conference after the bowl game. So you are correct. That's how I feel. However, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, yeah, everything I'm thinking is predicated off, I've got things I trust about the team, the offensive line, returning production being one of them. When I was over there the other day, we were setting up to talk to Elko, and a bunch of offensive coaches ended up walking through, talked to a bunch of them. But I remember Colin Klein walked by, Just kind of asking him how you feel going into spring. And first thing out of his mouth is returning production on that offensive line, man. It makes all those routes look a lot better on paper when they can actually be run the way you want them to instead of ending up all squiggly in the post-game QCR. So I think that if you gave me those things, then I would call A&M a top three, top four candidate in the SEC. So at that point, we shaved the pool considerably. Only thing I would worry about. So if you tell me D-line's top 5 to 8, Reed is top 5 to 8, I do agree with you. If all that falls into place, even if it doesn't, the running game probably will be very good. If it does fall into place, probably be extremely good. D-line being top 5 to 8 means you probably don't have to score 40 a game to win. I would think they're right there. And then the only question I would have is, does Arch Manning turn into a transcendent star at Texas? Does someone in the conference separate? Which I don't see right now, but it's also March right now. If that doesn't happen, they're a candidate to win the SEC.
How big of a year is this for Colin Klein, considering he was a hot name when A&M got him last year? I don't know if he fell out of favor. I mean, the offense was good. It wasn't what we wanted it to be, but he had some injuries. There's some questioning about the offense. I think I'd like to see what he can do with Marcel with a full offseason, gearing the offense towards him. How big of a year is it for Colin Klein?
It's a big year, but I mean, he'd probably just tell you, well, every year is a big year. These guys, what I respect about them is you hardly ever hear them making excuses publicly, but you and I know, as well as anyone, that there are 37 different reasons when if a season doesn't work out, it didn't work out. That doesn't necessarily fall on their shoulders. I don't get paid to make excuses for coaches, nor do I. But sometimes logically, there is an understandable reason why things happened or didn't happen in this case. Like you said, it wasn't an anemic offense last year or anything like that. But I do believe that a lot of these guys' system works if everything's clicking. Okay, they wouldn't accidentally stumble into that job if their system didn't work. The name of the game in college is having a malleable enough system to where if things are operating at B- efficiency levels, you can still squeeze a winner out of it. Most everybody's offense is going to click if you got the LSU 2019 lineup on the field. Everybody's system will click then. But what if you're thin on the right side of the offensive line? What if you don't really have a true number 2 receiver? What if you get banged up at tailback in fall camp? Can you do the Chip Kelly basically? Can you snake your way, game plan by game plan, changing week over week? Can you snake your way to a top 25, top 30 offensive finish? That's the skill. Like, that's where you separate in college football to me.
You fill out your bracket yet?
I did not.
Me
I
neither.
did not quite yet, but I have realized I've paid the least amount of attention to college basketball this year as I have in a long time, which makes me feel great about March and April, because those are the people who used to school me when I did watch college basketball hardcore. So in a strange way, me not being able to tell you who the head coach at Virginia Tech right now is or wherever makes me feel oddly confident that I'm about to smoke people in March Madness brackets.
I think you said it well. My youngest daughter always wins our bracket, or my wife, and they watch zero college. Well, actually, my youngest daughter watches the Aggies. That's about it. Josh, great stuff, man. We'll talk to you next week.
Appreciate it, David.
See you, man.